24/7 podcast.
Greetings to you, music lovers, thrill seekers, conversationalists all across the fruited plain. We've come to the end of yet another busy broadcast week. That means it's Open Line Friday. Let's get started.
Live from the Southern Command in sunny South Florida, it's Open Line Friday.
And whatever you want to ask, whatever you want to talk about, that's what Friday is all about. Here's the telephone number, 800-282-2882. If you want to send an email, lrushbo@eibnet.us. So I have some things left over from yesterday that I want to dig back into today. At the top of that list, the Democrats are being introspective for the first time in a long time about why they keep losing. And man, oh man, Andrew Sullivan at, Andrew Sullivan at the, I'll put it somewhere else. Andrew Sullivan has a piece asking, why does everybody feel so sorry for Hillary Clinton? And it's a great question, and of course, it's a question I, El Rushbo, am capable, I'm qualified to answer. It's at New York Magazine. Why do Democrats feel sorry for Hillary Clinton? As opposed to blaming her for the loss. That's where he's going with it. And I, as the primary deconstructor of all things left and Democrat, can easily answer his question. And we've also got the continuation of palace intrigue in the White House. This is getting amazing. The various factions, who they are, what they are leaking. Just to give you a little hint, there is serious leaking that Trump is going to deploy anywhere from 50,000 to 150,000 troops to Syria, that this is going to happen at the behest of David Petraeus, who has lost his security clearance under Obama, but is heavily tight and influential with H.R. McMaster, and that Petraeus feels the job in Iraq was not done, that Bush ended things prematurely, that Obama made a mess of everything, and these military guys think the Middle East and ISIS and Syria, all of that, need to be cleaned up, cleaned out once and for all. And Steve Bannon doesn't want any of that. And so there are these factions in the White House arguing over these policies, and some people are not being permitted into the policy discussions. But that's what the palace intrigue is all about. So we will be delving into that as well. And it turns out, folks, I think it turns out here that good old Judge Napolitano was right. Remember when he said that it was a British spy agency that had been digging into Trump and collusion in Russia, and he goes on Fox and announces it, and everybody says, you're a nut, Judge. You just made it up. It isn't true. Fox suspends him for a while. He comes back, and after his suspension, he comes back and he keeps repeating it. And I'm saying, what? Judge, what are you doing here? They just suspended you for this, and now you're back, and it turns out it looks like he was right. British spies were the first to spot Trump team's leaks with Russia. And the very group that the judge cited is called GCHQ. That's the British spy agency here, said to have alerted U.S. agencies after becoming aware of contacts in 2015. Look, and that's in the UK Guardian. What is now been established? The world was spying on Donald Trump. Obama had seen to it after the Brits clued him in. I guess it's a timeline this story wants to advance. The world was spying on Trump. And even with all of that, Hillary couldn't win. Even with the establishment of the world aligned against Donald Trump and in support of Hillary Clinton, she couldn't win. Now, as best I have been able to determine, and I will explain all this as the program unfolds, all of the spying on Trump was not done to prevent him from winning, because at the time it was happening, nobody thought he would win. They were trying to impress Hillary. For when she became president, to be able to say, look what we were able to do for you. It was also something that could be used to further damage any other Republicans that ever wanted to run for president by saying, look what they do, by linking Trump to virtually every Republican. So all this stuff happened. This makes it even more fascinating to me. That all of this intel gathering, all of this spying on Trump took place not to stop him because they didn't think he was going to win. It was all done for other reasons, and among them to set these people up to be looked upon favorably by Mrs. Clinton and her campaign and then her administration. They never once gave thought to the fact that Trump was going to win, but the way it ends up here, we know that Obama released intel data gathered by domestic agencies to 16 other intel agencies, including many foreign countries around the world, making sure that whatever was dug up and learned about Trump. And there's another thing. They found nothing. The world was investigating Donald Trump and his collusion to Russia for over a year and a half, and they found nothing. Believe me, if they would have found it, we would have heard about it in late October when they started to get worried that the NBC tape didn't take Trump out of the race. If they had found anything, we would have heard it by now. They got zilch, folks. Zilch, zero, nada, and yet they won't give it up. They're continuing because why, Andrew Sullivan asks, why do Democrats feel sorry for Hillary Clinton? That's so easy. He's frustrated by it. I mean, I can understand. There are a lot of Democrats think that she's the reason that they lost because she didn't try hard, because she's not competent. She's demonstrated over and over she's a lousy candidate. She was only the Democrats' choice because there really wasn't anybody else. And it was her turn. Everybody figured she was owed a debt for making sure that Bill Clinton's career was not derailed by his own peccadillos, by her hanging in there. You know, they gave her health care to fix it, reform. She made a mess of that. She made a mess of the bimbo eruptions thing. After losing to Obama in the 2008 primaries, she rigged the game in 2012 so that no other challenger would get anywhere, including Crazy Bernie. And that was really the only election fraud that occurred in 2016 was Hillary and Debbie Blemmer-Schultz rigging it against Crazy Bernie. But they had to rig it so that there wasn't a surprise person like Obama was a surprise in 2008. She never has. I mean, the Senate seat in New York, if you're a Democrat running for the Senate, you can't lose. I mean, no matter who you are. You can't. There just aren't enough Republican votes to defeat you no matter, so you can win anything. Winning the Senate seat in New York, that doesn't recommend her for running for further higher office, because that was an automatic, that was a given. Sullivan's right. I mean, why are we wasting time here trying to find blame and why she's a victim? If we don't get this right, if we don't correctly identify where we went wrong, we're toast for a long time. And that's what there are 2 or 3 additional stories where the Democrats are starting to get introspective. In other words, asking what they have done wrong. You never see this, which is why I'm kind of interested in it. Take a look at it. Try this. You know, the deep state is in a state of panic over the arrival of Donald Trump. The deep state at the EPA is digging in, and they're refusing to implement any of the new EPA policies that the new director and Trump want to implement. It's the same thing at, Department of Labor. Apparently, at the Department of Labor, the Obama embeds over there are practically insane and have mounted a resistance campaign within the Department of Labor to oppose anything coming down the pike. It's eventually going to blow up on them, but I mean, they're just still in a state of panic and denial. Now, back to the EPA. Try this headline. This is from the Washington Examiner. Pruitt ends EPA gym memberships. Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Scott Pruitt said yesterday the days of gym memberships being paid for by the American taxpayer are over. He was on Fox and Friends, where he was asked about documents released on a Wednesday that show that EPA employees spent more than $15,000 on memberships to various gyms outside of the free service they were already given. I guess they have the EPA gym, the workout area, but some of them wanted to go bigger than that, and so they did, and they charged it off to the American taxpayer, and this guy says those days are over. You already provide gym membership and service here at the EPA, and you're not going to go out and get supplemental and have it paid for. And they're livid and outraged in the deep state at the EPA. You want to know how sick and perverted they're making our college students? This is from Heat Street. College students are now taking short, cold showers to prevent climate change. An offshoot of Indiana University's student government is urging students to take short, cold showers to save the planet. Living sustainably is one of the easiest things you can do. The head of the Students Association newly founded sustainability department told the newspaper, turn off your lights, unplug your electric devices, take shorter cold showers. Maybe some people are deterred by that, but as time progresses, these issues are going to become much more pressing and much more internationally important. These kids don't realize that this stuff has been going on for decades. How many times over the course of our lives have we been told, well, look what they did to the toilet from 6 gallons to 1.5. You just have to flush it 3 or 4 times, depending on who you are. And then you have all of these recommendations. Don't take long showers, take cold. No, there's nothing new here. And while some fanatics have already implemented stupid things like this, shorter cold water showers, the complaints of climate change have not abated. All the electric cars people are driving, it's not changing anything. Climate change is becoming worse. When are these kids going to learn that no matter how much of the advice is given that they follow and take, it isn't going to change anything? It isn't going to save the planet. Because hot showers are not destroying the planet. Hot water is not destroying the planet. But that's beyond the point. The point is that for 30 or 40 years, people have already begun to behave in these ways and drive these so-called clean energy cars. And all during that period of time, the global warming activists continue to tell us that climate change is getting worse. In other words, none of the efforts that anybody have made to reduce carbon footprints is ever given any credit. Nothing anybody has done or is doing is ever credited as helping. At some point, after 30 years of following all these silly guidelines, you would expect there to be a noticeable reduction in the warming of the planet. Oh, there has been that. Does it strike you strange that the global warming crowd, with all of these mandates and all these behavioral tips, doesn't want to take credit for it? They don't want to take credit for the fact the planet hasn't warmed in 15 years? They're looking for excuses to explain it rather than take credit for it. If they were smart, they'd be taking credit for the temperature not having increased and then saying, see, we need to do more of what we have been suggesting. Thank God they're not that smart. You know, I don't know about the Earth's environment, whether it's sustainable or not, but I'll tell you what is sustainable, and that's stupidity. We're doing the greatest job of sustaining stupidity in this country. It's as though we're trying to. I'm not going to take any more hot showers because I'm trying to save the planet. Hey, you kids, when you move back home with your parents, when you graduate college, keep using the cold water. Your parents will be happy that you're saving them some money. But that's about all you'll be doing. Okay, to the stack of stuff here on what's going on in the White House. And as part of the stack, there's a New York Times story. And it actually was written following what happened on this program yesterday. Remember, I opened the program asking a number of you Trump supporters if you're starting to feel betrayed over Trump flip-flopping apparently on the Export-Import Bank and what you think he said about not intervening militarily in other countries like Syria, and tricoms, and currency manipulation. The New York Times obviously was listening, because they based a story around the whole premise. And the headline focused on Trump's successes. Many supporters are unfazed by his reversals. As some on the right howled about a series of reversals by President Trump on a number of his campaign promises, Rush Limbaugh asked his listeners on Thursday whether any of that flip-flopping really mattered. And they quote me accurately here as saying, "See what Jeff Sessions is doing?" Mr. Limbaugh said of the Attorney General, answering his own question. "Damn straight," they quote me as saying. "Have you seen what the job situation is? Have you seen what the economic forecasts in the future are?" He went on. The sentiment that Mr. Limbaugh was homing in on, the undented confidence that many Trump supporters have in the president as a get-things-done leader and deal-maker, is the reason many conservatives say they don't think Trump will suffer. This story reeks with disappointment. The New York Times went out and sought Trump supporters who were angry and seething and ready to throw him overboard already, on the basis that he had lied to them or had misled them by saying what they wanted to hear during the campaign, and in less than 100 days reversing himself. You know, some people are even talking about this giant missile that we dropped on ISIS yesterday. Wait till you hear the typical liberal reaction to that. It's coming up. And the media has gone out of its way to try to find people angry over Trump doing this. People that voted for Trump. If you go back, and I'm sure I don't even have to remind many of you of this, you Trump supporters, defeating ISIS was one of the top 10 often repeated campaign promises that Trump made. And I wouldn't even call it a campaign promise. It was an assurance. He said within 30 days, he's going to ask his military people to come up with a great plan, the greatest plan that there's ever been, the greatest plan ever to take out ISIS. Well, apparently that plan was sought, and apparently that plan has been presented, and now they're acting on it. This, at least, is an instance where Trump is doing everything he promised he would do. The only thing that he didn't say was when he would do it. And that, of course, is strategic. He doesn't believe the enemy should be informed in advance of when we're going to hit them. He thinks it's very stupid and dumb to do it like Obama did. In fact, you got to love Trump. He even said of his giant bomb that was deployed yesterday on that ISIS tunnel, he's out there saying, "This shows the biggest difference between me and Obama in the last 8 years." And he's exactly right. It just, you don't have presidents talking that way very much. Grab soundbite number one. We can squeeze part of this in before the break.
We are so proud of our military, and it was another successful event.
Did you authorize it, sir?
Everybody knows exactly what happened, and what I do is I authorize my military. We have the greatest military in the world, and they've done a job as usual. So we have given them total authorization, and that's what they're doing. And frankly, that's why they've been so successful lately. If you look at what's happened over the last 8 weeks and compare that really to what's happened over the last 8 years, you'll see there's a tremendous difference.
Big difference between me and Obama. But the point he's making, they asked, did you order the bomb dropped? And Trump wouldn't say he did. He said, I got confidence in my generals. All right, it's Open Line Friday. Rush Limbaugh behind the golden EIB microphone at 800-282-2882. Here, no. Got to go to line... Is line 4 ready to go? Okay, we're going to Chris here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Chris, you're first. That means you got to set the tone for the rest of the day when it comes to callers. That means you got to be good and interesting and compelling. Can you do it?
Right.
Testing. Hello. Are you there?
Oh, can you hear me?
I do now. Yeah.
Okay. Rush, thank you for taking my phone call. I appreciate it. My question to you is,
Do you think Steve Bannon's time is limited in the White House with the current issues that Trump is facing from mainstream Republicans? I mean, I understand Steve Bannon got a core group of individuals to vote for Trump and set his base for his ideals. But do you think that time is coming to an end? Do you think he'll stick around for the full 4 years?
Well, now that's a different question. There's a bunch of questions you could ask. Do I think Bannon will be there 4 years? No, but only because very, very few White House aides last that long. The press secretary is not going to be there 4 years. Okay. The Clinton and Obama press secretaries were not there 4 years. You start getting into year 4 and you get into the re-election, that's when people start bailing. Now, and I'm just giving you that statistically. I'm not answering whether or not Bannon will make 4 years based on what's happening now.
Right.
I'm basing it purely on the statistical record of the movement in and out of an administration by aides. Let's take this. What you really mean, you're asking me, is Trump going to fire him or is he going to quit? One of the two things, right? Based on what's happening now. Folks, I've never seen, I went by, saw some people last night after the program, but I haven't seen it in a while, and I made an observation to them. I have never seen a presidential aide or advisor so focused on, so often reported on as Steve Bannon. I've never seen it. I can't think of any presidential who, by the way, where the subject of the reporting is, will this guy last? Can we get rid of this guy? Is this guy losing the power struggle? Now, one of my beliefs, one of my theorems that I have evolved over the years is that when it comes to Democrats and the media, they will always tell us who they fear, and all we have to do to learn that is look at who they're trying to damage and or destroy. And it is clear that they are scared to death of Steve Bannon. Now you have to ask why. What is it about Bannon that scares them? Well, the answers, many of them are obvious. He has a disdain for the establishment. He has a disdain for everything the establishment holds dear, such as globalism, a singular, powerful world government in which the United States is an eager participant. He opposes, it's not just the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned about. The governing complex today is military, industrial, financial, and media. It's not just military and government. It's now investment banks, big-time Wall Street money, such as Goldman Sachs. Do you know that you'd have to go back a long way to find a presidential administration that has not had somebody from Goldman Sachs in it? Either a chairman or a president or a trader or somewhere. You'd have to go back a long time to find that. The media, they are, of course, not at the table per se, but they may as well be. The military, the generals, and so forth. Bannon opposes all of this. Bannon thinks that's why the United States is mired in the muck that it's in. He opposes all of it. And Trump gave the impression that he opposes all of it during the campaign. Then Trump names Bannon as the CEO of the campaign. So that puts Bannon's fingerprints on the campaign. And then after he wins the presidency, Trump makes him the chief strategist. Well, Bannon is an outsider. He has worked at Goldman Sachs himself, but it's not something that he trades on the way he would if he were liberal and trying to get on with Democrat administrations. He's done many other varied things. But Bannon represents everything the left and the establishment hates. And because he has Trump's ear, and because they think Trump is influenced by the last person he talks to. This is something very important for everybody to understand. People we're talking about here, the media, the Washington establishment, they are not impressed with Donald Trump's intellect. They believe that Trump is easily manipulated. They believe that Trump will believe and be influenced by the last person he talks to on an issue. So if Trump is worried about what to do about the Chinese currency manipulation, if the last person he talks to is Jared Kushner, and Jared Kushner says something that is impressive to Trump, then that's what Trump will. That's what they believe. And since Bannon is close and the chief strategist, they think Bannon is often the last guy Trump talks to. They also believe that Trump has a very fragile and thin ego. So they set in motion, and this is true, they set in motion a plan to make Trump angry at Bannon by putting Bannon on the cover of Time magazine as the real brains behind the administration. Saturday Night Live did the same thing. This was a coordinated effort designed to make Trump jealous and angry. They want Trump to say, I'm the top dog. Bannon's not. Bannon doesn't mean anything. I'm the guy that's making... They think Trump's ego is that shallow and flexible that he can be manipulated in that way. And they're now thinking that it's right because of what Trump is saying about Bannon to Michael Goodwin in the New York Post. Yeah, I don't know Steve all that well. You know, he came to my campaign really late after I'd beaten everybody. I mean, I'd practically won the nomination. He comes on in August. Look, I'm my own strategist. I don't need to talk to us. So to me, aha, they say, we are having success. We are distancing Trump from Bannon because part of it is jealousy. I mean, they all wish they were that close to a president. To them, Bannon's a pig, and he's a slothful pig. I mean, the guy ran the Breitbart website. Look at him. How can a guy like that? What's his pedigree? He didn't come from the chain of command you have to come from to get that close to power. There's all kinds of personal, it's professional, and it's obvious that they are desperately worried about the guy because they think it is crucially important to get him out of Trump's sphere of influence. So the question now becomes, is what we're hearing about Bannon being on thin ice, is it true? You want to sit as a political story. It's gone to the completely fully insane now. There is a long story in the Politico today. It might be their magazine, I forget which. And the top half of the web page when you log on is a close-up of Bannon, who does not look good. And the headline is, I'm paraphrasing him, but it's close to this. If Trump fires Bannon, will Bannon seek revenge? It is a story of all the things Bannon has done to get even with people who he has fired, who has mistreated, or what have you. And it indicates, it quotes people that have been fired by Bannon or quit Bannon, and they detail what he does to get even with it. It's incredible. So they make it look like Trump might be afraid to fire Bannon because look at what this guy's capable of doing. And I'll tell you what the purpose of this story is. I can tell you right now what the purpose of this story is. This headline, if Steve Bannon gets fired, will he seek revenge? This story is aimed right at Donald Trump. What they want Trump's reaction to be, you kidding? You mean you think I'm afraid to fire Bannon because I'm afraid of what Bannon might do? Oh, yeah? Well, take a look at They're trying to engineer Bannon being fired. To answer your question, I don't think Bannon will be fired. I don't think it at all. Now, if a decision is made by Trump that he doesn't want Bannon there, he will do things that make Bannon quit. But he will not fire him. I mean, you don't need that. I mean, here you hail the guy after the campaign as your CEO of the campaign, and you make him the primo number one strategist in less than 100 days. You blow the guy out. In the midst of all these stories, you let the media have a scalp. Just don't see it happening. But, and I don't know, folks, but if Donald Trump wishes that Bannon wasn't around, then might engage in behavior, say things to the media that would so irritate Steve Bannon that he resigns. But then Bannon's smart enough to know all this too. This takes us to the other side of the administration and who's orchestrating all this stuff against Bannon. And we know who that is, or we think we do. And all of this palace intrigue is all focused. You notice nobody's leaking anything about Kellyanne Conway. You notice nobody's leaking anything about Gary Cohn. You notice nobody's leaking anything about Dina Powell. You notice nobody's leaking anything about Ivanka. You notice that nobody's leaking anything about Jared Kushner. Well, I take that back. There was a story yesterday in the Washington Free Beacon. And it was fascinating. The story in the Washington Free Beacon yesterday was a giant hit piece on little Jared. This story was all about how this 36-year-old punk is trying to take over the entire National Security Council. And who the heck does he think he is? This story obviously was planted. You know, this is an intricately woven web of deceit in here, and winding your way through it is a difficult thing to do. And so all you can do is use intelligence guided by experience. And when it comes to the direct question of would Bannon be fired, you know, with an asterisk that I don't really know, I'm just wild guessing, but I would say no based on all of the information I provided up to this point. But with this crowd, anything can happen. I think that's part of their strength, is the unpredictability, and you never know what's coming next. It keeps everybody off balance, which is, I think, a position Trump likes. Anyway, I have to take a break here, folks. Open Line Friday will continue. We come back right after this. Okay, let me give you some headlines here. That New York Times headline that we just delved into, focused on Trump's successes. Many supporters are unfazed by his reversals, and the story begins with a quote of your beloved host. Washington Post, within Trump's inner circle, a moderate voice captures the president's ear. Parentheses, we hope. And this is about Gary Cohn, the Goldman Sachs trader, liberal Democrat, and his buddy and partner, Dina Powell. They're not married. She's married to somebody else, but they are a duo in there from Goldman Sachs. They're Democrats. They're the globalists that Bannon keeps talking about, along with Jared Kushner and Ivanka, about whom, if you really want to get into this, about whom it is said Jared and Ivanka want to get control of the Trump presidency because they care about what's written about them in New York Magazine and Vogue. I am not, folks, I'm just telling you what I hear. I've not read this. There are people who are telling me that Ivanka and Jared actually think of themselves as the first couple because of their youth and their age and their generation, and that whatever their dad does reflects on them, and they want to have influence over what their dad does, so that what is reflected on them will make them cool and hip to their fellow millennials. Up to you to decide whether there's anything to this. But this is among the countless stories going around, such as this Washington Post story. Within Trump's inner circle, a moderate voice captures the president's ear. Oh, let me circle back to Ivanka and Jared. Have you heard that the reason that we sent the 59 Tomahawks into Syria is because Ivanka reportedly was brokenhearted over the pictures? Okay, so if you've heard that, and that's not an obscure, off-the-wall piece that's been in mainstream pieces, then is it hard to believe that Ivanka and Jared would want to try to control as much of the presidency as possible so that it reflects well on them and what they believe? I mean, after all, if your dad were president and you're in there in the White House every day, do you think you just sit by, let dad do what he does? Or would you Just putting it out there to ponder. Anyway, this Washington Post piece, as power struggles and ideological battles engulf the White House, an unlikely player is exercising new influence on the direction of President Trump's regime. Gary Cohn, a former Goldman Sachs president, is capitalizing on his new position as director of Trump's National Economic Council to push a centrist vision, a moderating vision, and bipartisan support on some of Trump's top agenda items, such as tax reform and the infrastructure plan. The growing strength of Cohn and like-minded moderates was on display this week as Trump reversed himself on several high-profile issues. Okay, so who leaked this? Who arranged for this story to get published? Well, I'll guarantee you this, the Washington Post loved printing it. Anything that they could do to say that Bannon's losing power, anything they can do to say that Trump is now normalizing and becoming more like an establishment president, they would eat it up. Anything they can do to neuter Trump. I'm even on page 3 of this story. Rush Limbaugh, however, last week called Gary Cohn a very ideological liberal Democrat and a traitor at Goldman Sachs. Limbaugh expressed concern that Cohn and his allies in the White House are starting to have sway at Bannon's expense. I don't know that I said that specifically, but I did acknowledge the effort to bring that about is certainly happening. You know, there's so many of these stories, Gary Cohn and obviously Bannon. You'd be forgiven if you forgot that Donald Trump was president now and then. Anyway, hang in there, folks. We have come to the conclusion of our inaugural hour. We've got much more. We'll be right back. And welcome back. It's great to have you here, Rush Limbaugh and the EIB Network, the Limbaugh Institute for Advanced Leftist Studies, Advanced Anti-Leftist Studies, here at the Excellence in Broadcasting Network on Friday.
Live from the Southern Command in sunny South Florida, it's Open Line Friday.
800-282-2882. If you want to be in the program, it's 800-282-2882. Email address, lrushvo at eibnet.us. Remember, Open Line Friday, you can talk about whatever you want. We always try to jam more phone calls in on Friday, too. But that depends. It really depends on what kind of detailed answers I have to provide. Call after call after call. You ask simple questions, we move on to the next caller. Ask complex questions, and there's no right or wrong to this. I'm just explaining how we try to take as many phone calls as we can on Open Line Friday. Folks, it's also Good Friday today. And this would be a great time for me to tell you about my brother David's new book. Now, I've mentioned on previous occasions that my brother has become devotedly Christian and religious, and he's fascinated by it in a scholarship sense. He has, like my father, read the Bible numerous times and is constantly seeking to understand it so as to be able to explain it to others and to answer other people's questions. And he's desperately desirous that as many people as possible try to learn the story of Christ and the Gospels, as would anybody be who is passionate about anything. So his books on the subject have been written in the fashion of creating interest rather than preaching answers. And his latest book has just came out this week. It's called The True Jesus. And he wrote the book because, among all these other things I said, he's discovered as he's talked to people about Christianity and Christ that people are intimidated by the Bible. That Christians today as you know, have become part of a minority. Well, maybe not a minority, but Christians are an approved group that you can criticize them, you can make jokes about them, you can laugh at them, you can impugn them all you want, and they have no recourse. They have to take it. You can't make fun of any other religion. You can't make jokes about any other without there being a price to pay. But in pop culture, you can impugn, you can destroy, you can misrepresent Christianity, you can make fun of Christians all you want and be praised and have a career made out of it. And to my brother, this is distressing, and he has sought ways to try to make it all less intimidating. And that's what this book is. And the first thing about it is he believes that the entire concept of Jesus is misunderstood by virtue of pop culture, by virtue of, and not just pop culture, but in some of the ways that Christianity itself uses to spread the word. His research and his belief is that Jesus, depicted by pop culture, is milquetoast, non-judgmental, uncontroversial. He lived a perfect life, therefore he never made anybody mad. He lived a perfect life, therefore he never did anything wrong. Therefore he lived a perfect life. Everybody loved him. Lived a perfect life, never judged anybody. And now Jesus is used by any number of people to justify their own behavior. And he says, this is not who Jesus is, and it's not who Jesus was. I mean, there's even a group now saying, I'm perfect. God made me. And these are people who, nobody's perfect, which is the whole point. So he points out in the book, Jesus says in the Bible that he came to divide us, that he represents the truth. And he knows people are going to reject the truth. He didn't promise that by following him, you would get wealthy and prosperity or have an easy life. Quite the opposite. That if you attempt to live the life of Christ, you're going to be hated. You're going to be despised. You're going to be reviled. You're going to be laughed at and made fun of. That Jesus told us he would divide brother against brother and father against son, mother against daughter, all on the basis of belief or not. And so the milquetoast version of Jesus, all sweetness and light and non-judgmentalism, and everybody dazzled, obviously not the truth. And all of this can only be discovered by actually reading the Gospels. So you might say, well, why does your brother just say read the Gospels and writing a book about it? Because he's trying to be compelling. He's trying to entice people to get interested enough to actually read the Gospels and learn what he has learned. I talk about this with David frequently because he's devout. And he thinks that if people read the Bible with an open mind and an open heart, that the truth of Jesus and of God will explode on the reader in a mind-blowing fashion. So the purpose of this book, The True Jesus, is to introduce people to the Gospels, make them less intimidating. You know, it's written in such a way you can't even understand it. A lot of people don't understand the language itself, the prose, the way it's all put together. And so this book is to actually serve as an introduction, and most of all to encourage people to read the Bible for themselves rather than relying on other people who have and their interpretation or getting some of it from pop culture or what have you. Now, his book is in two main parts. Chapters 1 through 4 are an introduction to the Gospels. And they start from about 400 BC to the last book of the Old Testament, Malachi, written about the time Jesus was born. So it's about 400 years here, and much happened during those years. A whole bunch of empires were created. The scene was set, in other words, for the birth of Christ. The The second part of the book obviously examines the life of Jesus after birth. Chapters 5 through 12, second part, probably the main part of the book, if you want to look at it that way, combines all four Gospels into a unified chronological account. In other words, changes the order and puts it chronologically as it happened, so you don't have to go back and forth and remember where you were. And there's commentary in every section. The main goal with the book is to stimulate readers to read the Gospels for themselves and to be less intimidated at the prospect of doing so. However, if you read this book, you're going to get a head start on the Gospels anyway. It's based on that. It's not just a couple hundred pages trying to motivate you to open the Bible and read it. It's full of details from the Bible and enticements to go further. So I wanted to mention it today. It's a perfect day to mention it. It's Good Friday, and it's my brother's third or fourth book on the subject, and they just keep getting better. It was a massive undertaking. You would not believe. Well, he hibernates. And the sourcing that he uses to put this together, he doesn't just look at the Bible and then start writing down what he thinks of it. He researches what others have said about passage, chapter, verse. If he doesn't quite understand it, he goes to places that he thinks can help him understand it so that he can then phrase it in ways that other people. It's like anything in passion. You believe in it, you want to share it. And in this case, his passion for Christ and Christianity and eternal life is something that he just is deeply devoted to and wants to share it and spread it with as many people as he can. And so these books do that. And this latest one is out now. It's Amazon, iBooks, Barnes & Noble, anywhere. It's True Jesus is the name. I have my copy because I'm his brother, so I already have my but I bought it. I bought my e-copy from iBooks. What do you mean, are there any pictures? He just got back from Israel. He took the Israel trip that I took back in 1993. So I only got 5 days. He was there for 2 weeks. And I knew it was going to have deep meaning for him after having written the book. I had to talk him into going because it's such a long trip. And he has so many other responsibilities at home. But he's glad he did it. It's a once-in-a-lifetime trip. And saw everything in Israel. Even Golan Heights, saw the political, saw the religious. And it's a worthwhile trip. But anyway, I just wanted to spend some time with this since this is Good Friday. And it's not in any way an interruption into what's normally happening out there. But look, seriously, if any of this has any interest to you, if you're curious, even if you think of yourself as a devoted and devout Christian, I guarantee you that this book is going to send you back to restudy, to re-examine, to re-look. It's that interesting. It's that compelling. And it's written from a standpoint of deep understanding and knowledge of the gospel after a lifetime of study. So if it's a subject that you think you want to look into, True Jesus would be a superb beginning point for you, actually. I must take a brief time out. Open Line Friday will resume when we get back. Don't go away. No, let me clarify. I had a couple of questions in email. The book doesn't replace the Bible. The True Jesus doesn't replace the Bible. It is for those people too intimidated to even start the Bible because it's too big. You don't think you're going to be able to understand it. You see the way it's written, no matter what version of it you get, and you never pick it up. You try to learn what's in it from other sources. The purpose of this book is precisely to take the intimidation factor of reading the Bible away from you by acquainting you with what's in it, equipping you for what you're going to find, chronological order. But really, folks, think of this. How many of you, when you think about Jesus, really think of somebody who's sin-free, who was portrayed as non-controversial, had the ultimate answer on everything, and everybody agreed? Well, you know that not everybody agreed, but that Nevertheless, it was milk toast and it was sweetness and light. That's not the way it was. Jesus was despised and hated, and he knew it was going to happen. The country, the world, the area in which it was divided precisely because of the challenges that he brought. He was a hugely controversial figure. He was not, for everybody, the long-awaited answer to the world's problems. So if you have an impression of Jesus as the ultimate answer, that, what would Jesus say? That's become a popular way to say, if we only knew what Jesus would say to the thing. Well, half the people who would hear what Jesus would say would refuse to accept it, as they did then. So it's not a question of being overwhelmed. It's a question of choosing to believe based on what's inside you. And all this book is a way of getting you to that degree of understanding and past all the fears or intimidation that people might have from reading the book, because the Bible's so big, so complicated, so it jumps all over. The Old Testament's organized, New Testament's organized, but believe me, this is a great assist in getting you ready. I mean, you'll open the Bible with a whole heck of a lot of understanding before you even read the first word, and that's what the purpose is. Here's AJ in Denver as we head back to the phones on the True Jesus. I'm sorry, my brother, David Limbaugh, True Jesus. AJ in Denver, great to have you. How you doing, sir?
Thanks, Rush. I'm doing good. I want to first thank you, and I appreciate you talking about the True Jesus book that your brother wrote, and I'm going to buy that book. So
thank you. I really think you'll thoroughly enjoy it.
I'm sure I will.
Regardless what your educational level is about Christianity and Christ, even if you're a scholar of Christianity, this book is going to highly impress you, guaranteed.
I'm looking forward to it. The reason I called was because as a member of the Trump base, President Trump, they don't understand him and they don't understand his base. The pundits ask questions. Well, what do you think about the flip-flopping? And, is he not staying? They don't understand that he's a businessman. You adjust to the market, you adjust to the situation, and you get things done. And that's what he's doing. And the Democrats lost because they didn't understand this, and the Republicans would have lost also. And so they don't understand this man. They don't understand the base, and it's so interesting.
You know what it's really rooted in, AJ? It's rooted in the fact that they still don't understand why such a large number of Americans voted purposely for a non-political outsider.
Exactly.
They continue to remember to factor that in there, but they cannot help it. They continue to try to plug Trump in to an existing political profile that they have established in Washington and judge him that way. In politics, there are flip-flops, exactly. In business, there are adjustments, as you've just said.
Exactly, and the two universal laws that Trump is using is the law of diminishing return and the law if nothing changes, nothing changes. And so for so long, nothing has changed, and we're looking for a change, and we're looking for the use of diminishing return, and that's why they dropped the 2 bombs, because we got everybody's attention now, and they understand that they have something to lose, and everything from the wall on. He's just changing things. The whole paradigm has changed in politics, and they don't get it.
Let me ask you this, AJ. What they're trying to make Trump-based voters believe by virtue of the way they're reporting in the media, they want you to believe that Trump's abandoned you, that he is no longer America first, make America great again. Do you think that in all these things that Trump is doing? Do you think Trump...
Oh, absolutely not. He's doing exactly what we expect him to do. He's doing exactly what he said he's going to do. He's got the number one thing that was important to me, or the top 3, was the Supreme Court justice appointment. That is huge, major. And he got that done, and he's doing other things. If the rest of the impotent Republicans would get behind him, we have the opportunity to destroy the Democratic Party with extreme prejudice if they just put on their big boy pants.
Well, that begs the question of, is that what some Republicans really want to do? And I'm not just saying that. I actually and it's come as a surprise to me. When I started this program back in 1988, I thought that the objective in politics was to not just win, but to dominate, so that the other side was nothing more than a little speck opposition, keep you honest and this kind of stuff. And it actually took a while for me to figure out that the Republican Party didn't think that way at all. They didn't think aggressive. They didn't think in terms of defeating and dominating and taking control of Washington with a reform agenda. And I labored under that belief for the longest time. And I forget when it actually hit me, but it was 10 years at least into doing the program. And then it got even worse than that. Then it became apparent that survival was the objective, and that even if they lost, that they had developed strategies to be the opposition and to be reactionary. And in some people, that was preferable to the pressure and the responsibility of actually having to lead and move an agenda. And I think this is another reason why people are having, I don't even think they're having, it's not right. I don't even think people are making an effort to understand Trump. I think inside the Beltway, not just Republicans, I'm thinking primarily of Democrats and media here. I think they're so arrogant that they don't look at Trump as anything other than a badly molded piece of clay that has to be fixed and reshaped and reformed. And there isn't any interest whatsoever in actually finding out who the guy is or what makes him tick. The only objective is to shut him down as he ticks now. Hey, folks, let me ask you a question here. In the 8 years of the presidency of Barack Hussein, do you remember any stories that discussed palace intrigue in the Obama White House? Did we get stories of competing aides sandbagging and sabotaging each other, seeking Obama's attention? Did we have any stories that positioned any of Obama's advisors as smarter than he was? Did we get any stories that treated Obama's advisors as the real brains behind the operation? I've been asking myself this during the break. Valerie Jarrett stories were all about how tight they were, and how, when you read a story about Valerie Jarrett and Obama, I swear the only reaction I had, well, where's Michelle in this duo? Valerie Jarrett was never portrayed as smarter than or more powerful than Obama. She was portrayed as a Svengali, as somebody he deeply trusted and deeply relied on and just desperately needed around all the time. But she was never portrayed as the brains behind the operation. The media never once did a story about how any advisor, any cabinet member was smarter than, braver than, better than, more equipped than Barack Obama. Barack Obama was always portrayed as the top dog, and it wasn't even close. There were no stories about palace intrigue. We didn't get stories of anybody trying to edge Valerie Jarrett out, for example. We didn't even know half the time who Obama's strategists were. We didn't even know who was the Bannon equivalent in the Obama White House. Okay, Valerie Jarrett. Okay, so if the Bannon equivalent is Valerie Jarrett, where were all the stories warning of the dangers of Valerie Jarrett and how we need somebody in there from Goldman Sachs to moderate the extremism of nowhere? Got none of it. But I want to remind you this. In the Reagan years, we got exactly this that we're getting now, and particularly in the second term. We had supposed intrigue between James Baker and Mike Deaver and Nancy Reagan. And Nancy Reagan was the great protector defending Ronnie from all of the people in his administration that meant to undermine him. And they made Nancy Reagan look like an absolute Fruit Loop because she supposedly relied on astrology every day to guide her husband's presidential strategy. It's amazing. And then Bill Clinton gets in the White House, and they even spike stories about him having sex with interns, much less run stories about any palace intrigue. And throughout the 8 years of Clinton, there still hasn't been a tell-all book other than by a couple of FBI agents. And yet, we're not even 100 days into the Trump administration to look at this. Why, the place is so out of organized, it's so disorganized, nobody knows what's up, nobody knows what's down, nobody knows who to listen to, nobody knows who's instructing Trump, nobody knows who's advising Trump, there's these battles going on. What are the odds that a whole lot of this is exaggerated way beyond what is real? I don't doubt that there is leakage going on, and I don't doubt that there are people within the White House maneuvering and vying for power and closeness to Trump, close proximity for the purposes of influence. But who put them there in the first place, folks? The way some of these stories are written, you got Trump actually hiring saboteurs. Trump has actually hired people trying to undermine him, if you listen to this media stuff. And I'll tell you something else. Just one more thing here before we move on. As you know, I have a fundamental belief system when it comes to believing and observing Washington politics, and it is this. I reject what is the conventional wisdom almost automatically. Because conventional wisdom is groupthink. And if everybody is thinking and saying the same thing, then there really isn't any thinking going on. Instead, there are orders being given, or there's indoctrination. But if everybody's saying and thinking the same thing, and if that becomes the conventional wisdom, then whatever else is going on, thinking is not part of it. So the conventional wisdom right now is that Bannon is a jerk, that he's an extreme danger to the normal standing of the United States and has to go, and that Trump is beginning to see this. And he's beginning to see this because of the sane influence that is being exerted by a Goldman Sachs liberal Democrat named Gary Powell. And so since there's a liberal Democrat from Goldman Sachs, he's being portrayed in wonderful terms, a moderating influence, an intelligence influence over Trump, an influence that is guiding Trump to a different era. It's just too camp. Maybe what's being written is what a lot of people are hoping will come to pass, or hoping will be the case. But what if what we're reading about this and hearing of, what if very little of it, or not much of it, happens to be true? Just to pose some other possibilities. What if, and I'm just throwing it up against the wall here, I don't know that any of these circumstances I will express in these questions is actually the case, but what if what's really going on in there, and I formulated this because this hit piece on Jared Kushner yesterday, and this hit piece has not gotten any play. It's amazing how this story, it was a Washington Free Beacon story, and it was a hit piece on Jared Kushner, how this little, inexperienced, young punk 36-year-old doesn't know diddly squat is trying to take over the whole National Security Council. And I said, now, who would leak that? Well, somebody obviously high up in the NSC doesn't like Jared poking around in there. The only thing we've heard about the NSC is that Bannon tried to worm his way in there and that Trump kicked him off. But even after Trump kicked him out of it, we saw him seated in the NSC meeting in Mar-a-Lago last week. I said, what the hell's going on here? So now they're leaking on little Jared, leaking on poor Jared. He's trying to take over the whole thing. So somebody at the NSC is either really scared or really protective of their turf. Now, this area is run by a guy named H.R. McMaster, who's very close with retired General Jack Keane of Fox News and David Petraeus. And these guys, they loved the hit on Syria. They loved the dropping that giant Mob bomb on ISIS. And they want to go further. What if, I just throw this out there as what if the real alignment is that Bannon and Kushner are actually aligned trying to fight off this other faction? What if Bannon's not isolated? What do you know, Rush? I don't know anything. I'm just sharing with you the thought processes I experience as I take all this stuff in. And remember, it's all under the umbrella of I don't believe the conventional wisdom. It's almost policy with me. I reject it out of hand because it's always manufactured. And if everybody's thinking the same thing, why do I want to join that crowd anyway? And the conventional wisdom is that Bannon's trying to be isolated and Kushner and everybody else trying to throw him out. But yet he's still there. So it is intriguing, but the even more important thing about it is that we never see any of this kind of stuff happen in Democrat administrations. But does it? You know damn well it does, because people are people, human nature's human nature. You know, there's people all over the Obama administration fighting to get close to him, wanting to be in the glow, in the light. Everybody loved Obama. Everybody wants to be as close as they can. You know damn well this kind of infighting was going on. But to protect Obama, the media would not dare report any of it because they couldn't dare report that Obama was not in total control every minute of every day of his regime. But they love reporting that Trump has no control of what's going on and needs all these outsiders to know even which way to walk after he gets up every day. So you have to exercise extreme caution in what of this you choose to believe. Let me put one more thing out there, since we've alighted on this tangent here. When we're talking about Trump, my question is, does anybody really understand him? Does Bannon? Does Gary Cohn? Does Dina Powell? Pretty sure Ivanka knows her dad. But these other people, do they really know Trump? I know they all think they do. And I think I do. I think, well, you know what I think. I don't think there's anybody better to explain Trump if you don't understand him, or if you've got a problem with it, than I, El Rushbo. But I wonder if, and it's all rooted in this very simple thing that people can't come to grips with, and that is Trump doesn't have a political philosophy. He's operating in the world of politics. He knows he's in the world of politics. But he has not done what most people who would want to succeed in politics would do. They'd learn politics. They'd spend years learning it, and they'd go get elected dog catcher and then move up from that, and they'd start building the political coalitions that you have to build, and you start meeting and learning the fundraisers and the donors. He doesn't do any of that because he's in it to turn it upside down and shake it up and shake it out so that all the loose change and junk falls out of it. But the people in politics don't know anything but that, and particularly left-wingers who've never worked in the private sectors. They are hopelessly unable to understand him. They never will. They see the world is made of flip-flops. In politics, you can't change your mind. Now, we agree if it's core principles we're talking about, but everywhere else in the world, it's called learning to adapt. In politics, that's called flip-flop, and we got to get rid of flip-floppers, and both parties are guilty of this. Trump doesn't show the slightest concern at maybe exhibiting flip-flop behavior. He spends a year campaigning on the premise that the Chi-Coms are currency manipulators, and then after a week of meeting with the head Chi-Com and talking about North Korea, all of a sudden the currency manipulation doesn't matter. Because, well, he lied during the campaign, Rush, that's why. No. Well, then he's a flip-flopper, you know, he just... No. Something's happened that in his world it makes sense to not start bashing the Chi-Cams over currency manipulation right now. But if they misbehave, it can easily come back. But I think it goes even deeper than that. Meanwhile, let's look at this. How much do we know about Barack Obama and all the influence? They try to hide the influence of Bill Ayers. They tried to hide the influence of Bernardine Dohrn. They tried to hide the influence of Rashid Khalidi. The LA Times still will not release a tape of Khalidi endorsing Obama back in 2008 at a luncheon, and this was one of the biggest anti-Israeli screeds that somebody supposedly had made. The LA Times sits on it, won't release it. It's not helpful to Obama, that's why. We haven't had any news stories or profiles on any of the people who were influential in shaping Obama. We've had books by people that are not the media. I'm not saying the profiles aren't there, but the media hasn't. Meanwhile, we know what Steve Bannon's electric bill was when he lived in Florida in 2012, and we know whether he paid it or not. The Washington Post on a Sunday morning did like a 7,000-word piece on all the places Steve Bannon has lived and all the places he stiffed in terms of paying the electorate. He's a presidential advisor. What is that all about? Well, it's obvious and clear what it's all about. Multifacets. If you do 7,000 words on all the places a guy's lived, the first thing you realize, man, this guy's not very stable. Man, you can't count on this guy hanging around anywhere. That's number one. Then you get the detail. The guy stiffs the electric company, stiffs the cable bill. So you get the picture. Yet everybody around Obama, angelic and prince-like, and so all this, I'm just saying, just be very, very suspicious of all of this stuff like you are with anything else. The drive-by media. Here's Bob in Coronado, California. I'm glad you waited, Bob. Open Line Friday. How are you doing?
Thank you. A quick observation and a very short prediction. You astutely pointed out in November that Barack Obama was very popular, had high personal approval ratings, yet his policies were unpopular. And my observation is, I think Trump, although his personal approving ratings are slightly improving, it doesn't really matter. People like his policies. And going forward into elections like these house races and so forth, Trump is popular as far as getting people to vote along with him, even though if they don't personally like him.
This is a very shrewd observation of yours. Because, folks, old Bob here is exactly right. Obama was popular, but his policies were hated, and it didn't make any sense. Why has he got the high approval number? Unless you factor the racial component, which you have to do. Now, in the case of Trump, old Bob here's right. Trump's approval numbers are coming up. Depending on where you look, now 46%. But his policies are loved and appreciated. And I'm going to tell you what, folks. If this keeps up, and it's very, very early, but if these successes, the border and Jeff Sessions, you're not welcome here. We have closed the border. That stuff keeps up, and jobs continue to come back, manufacturing jobs, car plants, all this stuff. If the economy picks up and we have some continuing military success, the Democrats don't have a prayer in 2018 and 2020. Now, I'm not predicting it because it's way too far off, but I'm just telling you the Democrats are thinking this way. I guarantee you. Because if these kind of successes continue to pile up, it won't matter whether Trump's favorability numbers, likability numbers are all that high. And they'll come up anyway as these successes mount up. And that's what Trump does in his own world, wins. Well, it's another exciting excursion hour, broadcast excellence in the can. So it just means a little brief pause here at the top of the hour so we regroup. And we'll change focus coming back into the Democrats' introspection of why they keep losing and the Hillary campaign and why everybody feels sorry for her. Right on, my friends. Right on, right on. Great to have you, Rush Limbaugh, behind the golden EIB microphone. It is Friday. It's Good Fridays. Let's keep it good. Let's keep it moving.
Live from the Southern Command in sunny South Florida, it's Open Line Friday.
was talking about conventional wisdom. I forgot to share with you what the conventional wisdom is right now. The bottom line conventional wisdom. And you'll find this at many conservative websites, many conservative blogs. You'll find this at liberal blogs. You'll find this in the drive-by media websites. The conventional wisdom is that Bannon is finished whether he stays in the White House or not. That the anti-Bannon forces have won. That in less than 100 days, Donald Trump has been converted from a populist and nationalist to an establishment moderate. The transformation didn't take long, and it has to be a devastating loss for Bannon. That is what you can. Rich Lowry has written that, for example. Now, a caveat, Lowry said, I don't know how this is going to end, so he's not suggesting we're there yet, but then he lays out the scenario I just shared with you as where it looks like this is headed. And much of the Beltway conventional wisdom is the same thing. That in under 100 days, the establishment moderate forces have already taken control of Trump. And the things he stood for during the campaign are shortly and surely going to disappear. Now, I don't know how that squares with Jeff Sessions going down and telling people, you're not welcome. Our border is not open. Our border is closed. And the way Trump's dealing with North Korea and Syria, I don't know. But I'm just telling you, that's what it is. Now, that's to end it. I want to move on to other things here. British spies were the first to spot Trump team's links with Russia. Exclusive, the GC headquarters said to have alerted U.S. agencies after becoming aware of contacts Trump and Russia in 2015. This is what Judge Napolitano was suspended for reporting. The adult Eddie Munster, Andrew Napolitano, he was suspended for all. They brought him back. He kept talking about it. I said, why'd they suspend him then? Turns out he was right. The GCHQ is an amalgamation of UK spy agencies. They played a crucial role in alerting their counterparts in Washington to contacts between members of Trump's campaign and Russian intelligence operatives. They first became aware in late 2015 of suspicious interactions between figures connected to Trump and known or suspected Russian agents. Now, again, this news is being portrayed, oh, man, what a bad day for Trump. Oh, my God, he was colluding. No, there isn't any evidence of it. This is the whole point. The news is the entire world was spying on Donald Trump, not just Obama. The entire he shared the intel data they collected with 15 or 16 other intel agencies and the UK. And that story, by the way, is from the UK Guardian. What this means is just about every Western civilization intelligence service was working with Obama. And all of this was to elect Hillary. This is the key, I think, to understanding this. And despite all of this, despite the UK, the world, Obama, all of these people spying on Trump and desperately trying to find a disqualifying connection, despite all of this, despite the Access Hollywood NBC tape, despite Trump saying what he still won, still beat Hillary Clinton. They still failed to defeat Donald Trump. And the UK Guardian, of course, does not treat it as I just did. What they try to do is what the intel agencies and the deep state have been doing ever since the story began. They have been trying to make it look like there is something there when there isn't. Folks, for a year and a half, the world was spying on Donald Trump, the Western world. Now, we know that they had nothing on Trump, because if they had it, we'd know about it long before today. If they had something on Trump, they would have revealed it during the campaign. The truth is, even despite this massive intel and spying effort, they found nothing. So, this now kind of raises a question. Because during the time they were spying on Trump, let's be honest about it, during the time we know that Obama was spying now, that FISA application and warrant for Carter Page, then Obama sharing the intel they were gathering with 16 other intel agents. Now the UK and their intel agencies have been involved. During this period of time, all of these people thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win. I think it's very important for the context of this to remember that during the entirety of the presidential campaign, during the Republican primaries, during the Republican debates, during the general campaign, there was never any doubt that Hillary Clinton was going to win. The doubt didn't begin to creep in until late October. But throughout the vast majority of the campaign, they all thought Hillary was in a landslide. They were acting like it. They believed it for a host of reasons. But even while they harbored that belief, they're spying on Trump. So why? If you're not worried that Trump is going to win, what are you doing here? And it's not because you're trying to gather intel in case he pulls off a surprise and wins, because you're not thinking he's going to win. It's not even a remote possibility that he's going to win. I'm talking about within the establishment, these intel guys, deep state people, not possible in their minds. Trump had he was a reprobate. He was a loon. Hillary was the voice of reason and experience and had the Democrat machine behind her and Clinton expertise. It was not even a possibility. And yet they're still doing all this spying. Why'd they think Hillary was going to win? Well, they believed the drive-by media. The drive-by media is as much responsible for the shock and dismay the Democrats felt as anybody else, because they ran the polling data, the fake polling data. They had Nate Silver out there guaranteeing Hillary 93% chance of winning. They ate it up. They believed it. They kept spying. The Russians had to also think that Hillary was going to win. And they wanted Hillary to win. You know what I think the hacking of the DNC computer network was? I think that was to get information to use against her as president. I don't think they were hacking the DNC to undermine her campaign, because I don't think they even considered for a moment that she would lose. I think they hacked her computer network, the DNC computer, the GOP. They failed at that with the GOP, but they succeeded. Can you imagine what they would have been able to hold over Hillary Clinton with the news that Hillary had cheated against Crazy Bernie? Can you imagine what the Russians would have been able to do vis-a-vis Hillary with whatever it was they learned in Podesta's emails? That stuff ends up leaking out anyway. But I think it was collected for use after she became president. So you might say, well, then why are they continuing to push this story? Because, folks, they've got nothing else. They don't have anything else to explain why she lost, except that. And that's important for their voters in 2018 and 2020 to believe that she actually won and had it stolen from her. Which takes me to Andrew Sullivan's piece that I referenced earlier in the program. It's in New York Magazine. Why do Democrats feel sorry for Hillary? Instead of blaming her. We're talking Democrats here. Why do they feel sorry for her? Why are all these women? Clinton shows up at a Women's Forum, and they all start crying. Oh, my God, I feel so bad for you. It's our fault we didn't get you. Oh, my God. She goes to a theater where there's a play. The women there stop everything. Oh, my God, it's so great to see you. It'd be so wonderful if you were president. I'm still wearing the bra you gave me in the campaign. Oh, my God. Instead of wondering why she blew it, why do they feel sorry for her? Andrew Sullivan's a little perplexed here. And he really unloads. First half of the story, kind of tolerant, but then later he turns his aim on her. He spends half the article trashing Trump, because it's New York Mag. He has to. He's a liberal Democrat. He's got to trash Trump. But after he gets that out of the way, and everywhere you see not an excoriation of one of the worst campaigns in recent history leading to the Trump nightmare. Instead, it's an attempt to blame anyone or anything but Clinton herself for the epic fail. We're told it wasn't Hillary's fault. No, of course it never is. It was the voters, those ungrateful, deplorable know-nothings. It was the voters. Their sexism defeated Hillary. A wave of misogyny defeated Hillary. James Comey defeated Hillary. Bernie Sanders' campaign, because it highlighted her enmeshment with Wall Street. If Bernie just shut up, Hillary would have won. Millennial feminists were guilty as well for not seeing what amazing crusader for their cause Hillary was. They weren't respectful enough. And this is, of course, how Hillary herself sees it. She wasn't responsible for her own campaign. Her staffers were. There's a new book. We've alluded to the new book. There's a new book on her campaign. And it says that after Clinton lost the Michigan primary to Crazy Bernie, the blame belonged to her campaign team, she believed, for failing to hone her message. She blamed her campaign team for failing to energize various voting blocks in Michigan. She blamed her staff for failing to take care of business in getting voters to the polls. It wasn't her. It wasn't the fact that she couldn't get into a van without 4 people assisting her because she couldn't stand up. It wasn't because of seizures. It wasn't because of an arrogant, condescending attitude of hers. It wasn't because her number one chief aide, Huma Abedin, is married to a creep out there exchanging sex pictures with teenagers. No, none of that had anything to do with it. It was Hillary's staff. That failed her. And it's Bill Clinton, too. You know, Bill Clinton didn't do enough. He didn't do enough early on. He was afraid to take over, and he shouldn't have. And he should have gone out there, and he should have exerted his expertise, but he had to defer to Hillary. Everybody deferred to Hillary. In the process, they saw to it that Hillary lost. It's never her fault. Well, as Mr. Sullivan writes here, let's review the facts. Clinton had the backing of the entire Democrat establishment, including Obama, which, Mr. Sullivan says here, is Obama's biggest mistake in 8 years, was going all in for Hillary. Hey, Andrew, he had no choice. He had no choice. The only hope for his legacy was Hillary. Rodham. Anyway, so she had the entire Democrat establishment. She even had the president all in for her. She was even married to the last popular Democrat president, as in 2008, when she managed to lose to a neophyte whose middle name was Hussein. Everything was stacked in her favor. In fact, the Clintons so intimidated other potential candidates and donors, she had the nomination all but wrapped up before she even started. And yet she was so bad a candidate, she still only managed to squeak through in the primaries against an elderly, stopped-clock socialist who wasn't even in her party and who spent his honeymoon in the freaking Soviet Union. She loses to this guy, or barely wins this guy. She ran with a popular Democrat incumbent president in the White House in a growing economy. No, it wasn't, but we'll let that slide. Mr. Sullivan writes that she had the extra allure of possibly breaking a glass ceiling that with any other female candidate would have been as inspiring as the election of the first black president. You know what he's saying here? He's saying she even blew the historical aspect of being the first female president because, well, he says any other woman, it would have been a great thing breaking through the glass ceiling, but Hillary didn't excite that way. Well, I don't know what it means to me. I have to think about it. But Andrew Sullivan clearly saying Hillary wasn't enough of a woman to get credit for blowing through the glass ceiling. His point is that not even the prospect of being the first female president was enough to excite people about her. In the general election, she was running against a malevolent buffoon with no political experience, with a deeply divided party behind him, whose negatives were stratospheric. She outspent the buffoon by 2-1. Her convention was far more impressive than the buffoon's. The demographics favored her, and yet she still managed to lose. But, her deluded fans insist she won the popular vote. But Andrew Sullivan says that's precisely the point. Any candidate who can win the popular vote by nearly 3 million votes and still manage to lose the Electoral College so profoundly, so incompetently, so miserably is useless as a politician and should be drummed out of the party under a welter of derision instead of being felt sorry for. And welcome back. Rush Limbaugh, talent on loan from God. And we go to Miami. We have Kevin, and he's 23 years old. Great to have you on the program, Kevin. How are you doing?
Rush, how you doing? First-time caller. I've been listening to your program since I can remember, more than 50% of my life. How are you doing?
I'm great, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Great. My first question is, you were just mentioning conventional wisdom, and I see that on a first-day basis, on an everyday basis, rather, firsthand, where, I joke around with my friends that one of my biggest accomplishments in my entire life will be going through, a 4-year university and not coming out liberal. But it's ridiculous, the amount of spoon-fed misinformation that happens on a day-to-day basis in all of my classes.
It is. I actually think it's dangerous.
Yep, I agree. So my question, I guess, is were you a conservative when you were my age? And if you were, I guess, how would you deal with going against conventional wisdom on a day-to-day basis and so forth?
Oh, you mean for you in your situation now, bucking conventional wisdom, such as the liberalism that permeates campus? Is that what you mean? Yeah, once, for as long as I can remember being interested in the affairs of state and the world, my instincts have always been conservative. Now, when I was young, and I knew what I believed, and I was fairly able to explain why, but it was a while before I understood why I believe, in terms of being able to explain it to other people. And that was just a result of a product of getting older and becoming exposed to more information and other people and being interested in it. But my instincts have always been conservative. I have never wavered from them in any way. My core beliefs are what they've always been, and they've never been negotiable or up for grabs. I've never been tempted. I've never believed I was wrong. I was never, meaning I've never believed that I've made the wrong choice in matters of ideology. I'm confident and confirmed belief in my conservatism to the point I never question it. I haven't questioned it any aspect of my life when I look back on it. I don't question it now. However, I've got to pause here for a break here at the bottom of the hour. Can you hang on through it?
Sure.
Good, because I need to pepper your mind for a couple questions. Here's Kevin back to Miami. Kevin, I've had a moment to think about your call. You're saying that you're in a hostile environment now, and you were asking me if when I was your age I had to deal with the same kind of hostile environment. Was I tempted to not be as public with my conservatism. Is that close to what your question is?
Yeah, correct. They're on the ballpark. I mean, there are times where I do speak up, to voice my opinion or I guess inform or try to inform anybody around me. Usually it's directed towards the professor. Not in an argumentative, tone, but more in an open for discussion. But the response I usually get is, either to be shunned or, well, that's not correct, or the kids around me will scoff. There are the times where I don't even speak up at all due to the attitude of the professor, just because I'm afraid it might affect my grade.
Yeah,
to me, that's more important.
That's you want the grade, and so therefore you're going to have to use that desire as your guidepost in how to behave. Now, when I was your age, I went to college just for one semester, and it was in the Midwest, and it was a school of 5,000 students, and they had enough books in the library so it qualified as a university. But back then, the majority of the students in school were not liberal, and the professors weren't. Well, the professors were. I take it back. But I remember I was in school when Kent State happened, when the National Guard gunned down some students at Kent State in a protest. And in the English comp class that took place the week after that incident, the teacher surveyed the class, did a survey of how many people agreed with the National Guard and how many agreed with the protesters. And you're going to be shocked to learn that a majority of the class supported what the National Guard did. Now, that would not be the case today in any
no, of course not.
university.
Yeah.
Where I encountered it, Kevin, was on the job. I started working. I left home when I was 20, and I went to Pittsburgh. And I worked at 2 radio stations in Pittsburgh, and I was the only conservative. Take it back. There was a second conservative at one of them, but we were never there at the same time of day. I was the only. I mean, I worked with people who thought George McGovern was the second coming. They would play Eleanor by the Turtles and dedicate it to his wife, to Eleanor McGovern. They thought it was incredible. It took every bit of restraint on my part to not even bring politics up. These were top 40 rock and roll radio stations where politics was not discussed on the air. I'm just talking about getting along with the people you work with. Now, they had no impact on whether I would get hired or fired. They're fellow employees. But it was if somebody has a party and invites everybody to the weekend, do you go? And if you go, do you bring the stuff up? And if they brought politics up, I was going to be the only one who was, and I'll tell you this, even back then, just don't doubt me, I knew 100% why I believe what I believe, and none of them could tell me why they believe what they could believe. They only could tell me how they felt. They couldn't give me intellectual reasons other than to say conservatism sucks. Republicans are mean. They couldn't sell liberalism to me if their lives depended on it. And you probably encountered much the same thing.
Right. Yeah, I found myself in the exact situation. Usually any type of intellectual discussion ends in, oh, well, Trump's a racist. And I said, well, that discussion ended pretty quick. And I mean, I don't take it any further than that, because once the Islamophobia, the homophobia, the races, once it starts flying out,
don't even get sucked in, Kevin. Don't even get sucked into that. If they bring up the premise Trump's a racist and you start trying to defend it, that's not the way to deal with it. Tell them that they're bigots for thinking this. Turn it back on them and make them the focus of discussion and not Trump. When they say Trump's an Islamophobe, tell them they're crazy. You're absolutely crazy, and you're not listening. You're certainly not listening to Trump. You're listening to a bunch of people not to focus it, turn it back on them. Make them defend what they believe. Don't let them turn it on you. You have nothing to defend. You don't have to explain anything to these people. They're the ones that owe you the explanation, because they're the ones out there attacking and trying to assault you verbally. But the best technique is turn it around on them by questioning, how the hell do you, where do you get off believing this stuff? You can't even back that up. And then they'll try. They'll try, and you'll hear quotes of what they heard on The Daily Show, or they'll quote what they heard on a late-night comedy show, or they'll quote some YouTube video that they saw. But they can't tell you themselves why they think what they think.
Yep. I mean, you'll have the same exact individual who will, who will cry and say, poor Syrians who are gassed by Assad. And then 1 week later, they'll go back and say, oh, my God, Trump has now started World War III and complain about it. And I'm kind of looking at them baffled. And then they'll even throw in, oh, well, Obama wouldn't have done this. And I'm thinking to myself, Obama's the reason why Trump had to make that decision to begin with.
Exactly. Exactly. You don't need any advice from me. That's exactly right. When the Syria thing comes up and they want to dump on Trump, you simply say the mess exists because of Barack Obama. You go all the way back to Iraq, and you say because Obama cut and ran out of Iraq, we have ISIS now. And Obama, with these phony threats and red lines in Syria, demonstrating we don't mean it when we huff and puff. And so they continue to gas and kill innocent people, and we've threatened all these years that we're not going to tolerate it. And Trump finally comes along and has put force to the policy. Again, they're the ones have to defend what they believe. Always try to turn it around rather than having you always be on the defensive. It's a favored tactic of the left.
Always, Rush. One last thing I want to point out, and this is the argument I usually use when they say that Obama was the savior of the Middle East. Something that I don't know why more people aren't screaming on the top of their lungs is that how in the world, I mean, you look at our relationship with Russia today, and they are, in fact, our largest geopolitical foe.
Right.
Well, tell me, how is it that Romney in 2012, in that debate, do you remember when Obama scoffed and mocked Romney?
Absolutely.
The 80s are calling and they want their foreign policy back. I mean, I replay that video so many times and I'm saying, how is it that a Massachusetts governor had more insight on our geopolitical foe than our standing 4-year president? And it baffles me, and people have no response to that. And it's amazing how clueless Obama was in foreign affairs 4 years ago, let alone now. And this is something that I want to scream off the top of my head.
Obama had two things that Romney would never have. Obama was African American, and that gave him a pass on any criticism. Any criticism was going to be called racist, so people didn't even try. You are crossing that line. You are now daring to criticize the great Barack Hussein O. So since you've crossed the line, you are the one that is behaving as a reprobate, because Obama is always going to be granted the latitude because of his intentions. Obama will always, by the left, be defended, exonerated from anything because he had the right idea. He really wanted to help. Maybe he didn't, but he cared and he tried. And Romney put his dog on the roof of the station wagon on vacation. Romney was mean. And that's, the real thing for you to do is run for the hills and avoid these people unless you can find a way to have fun turning it right back on them. This is Charles up next, McLean, Virginia. Welcome to Open Line Friday. Charles, how are you?
Good spirits, Rush. Long-time listener, since 1995, first-time caller. An honor to speak to you. I'm here to say that a lot of America's problems would go away if President Trump made a speech in which he promises to collapse the cost of converting salt water to fresh water, a process known as water desalination. If he promised to do that in just 7 years, say, farming any desert on the planet would become economic. As a result, in time, the deserts would turn green and the size of the habitable earth would double.
Hang on here. This is a fascinating premise. But the desalinization of salt water, this is now done by a nuclear reactor on our nuclear subs.
Correct.
Submarines cannot carry enough bottled water, so they have to be able to desalinate the ocean in order to provide drinkable water.
Correct.
For the sailors.
It's expensive.
It is massively expensive. The Saudis have a couple of desalinization centers for the royal family and the citizens because there's no rain, there's no water there. They have to desalinate.
Correct.
But it requires incredible amounts of energy to do it, and it is expensive as hell. Now, your theory is if we could bring the cost down, you could turn the oceans into source of fresh water, and therefore there would never be a drought anywhere, and you could market the water in the ocean and sell it and create a brand new economy with it.
Correct. And the reason is, well, energy is the cost of desalination is roughly a third energy, a third capital cost, a third maintenance cost. What's happened, but nobody has noticed in the last 10 years, is that literally a miracle has happened in Israel. They had a drought starting about 2000. They responded to the drought by collapsing the cost of energy of desalination from $2,000 an acre foot to $500 an acre foot. They send the water first to their cities, and then they clean it up a little bit.
Right, but I'm 20 seconds from being out of time. Since you bring up the Middle East, the problem there is that the Palestinians are not going to believe it. They're going to believe the Israelis have poisoned it. And it's because the problems there go beyond water. And I understand your thinking on this. It'd be great if fresh water could solve that problem, but I don't think that's... You ever get a chance to taste desalinated water? You'd be surprised how good it is. It tastes just like rainwater. It's like distilled water. Better than distilled water. I was stunned when I first had a glass of it. Have a great weekend and Easter, folks. We'll be back here on Monday.
Welcome to